I was in the garage when it happened. The smell of oil, rust, and humiliation thick in the air. My sister, Lila, was leaning against the wall, twirling her hair, pretending she didn't notice how her boyfriend, Mason, kept glancing at me with that smug little grin. He was the type who thought every woman in the room existed to validate him, and my parents adored him for it. I was just fixing the old shelf Dad told me to repair, minding my own business, when Mason made one of his jokes. "You'd look prettier if you smiled," he said, taking a sip from his soda like he owned the place. "Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video." I didn't even look up. "You'd look smarter if you stopped talking." Lila gasped, like I'd cursed the royal family. "Excuse me? Don't talk to him like that." Dad's voice boomed from the kitchen. "What's going on now?" Before I could even answer, Mason chuckled, the kind of fake laugh people use when they want to provoke. "Your daughter's got a sharp tongue, Mr. Holloway. Guess it runs in the family." Dad came storming in, wiping his hands on a greasy towel. His eyes landed on me, not him. "What did you say?" "I told him to stop talking," I said calmly, though my pulse was pounding. He stepped closer, that familiar flicker of rage behind his eyes. "And who do you think you are? You think you can talk back to a guest in my house?" "He insulted me," I said quietly. Before I could finish, he slammed the wrench from the workbench onto the floor, the clang echoing through the garage like a warning shot. "You always have something to say, don't you?" I took a small step back. "Dad, I wasn't—" He picked up the wrench again and hurled it across the room. It hit the metal shelf beside me, missing my shoulder by inches. The sound rattled every nerve in my body. Lila flinched, but stayed silent. Mason laughed under his breath. "Guess someone needs to learn manners." That broke something inside me. Dad's face was red with fury. "You just can't shut up, can you? Always making things difficult. Always embarrassing us." Mom appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, lips curled into that cruel little smirk she saved just for me. "Oh, for God's sake, Robert," she said. "She's just jealous her sister found a man." Lila rolled her eyes. "Obviously, she can't stand seeing me happy." I felt my throat tighten. "Happy?" I whispered. "He talks to you like you're—" Mom cut me off, stepping closer. Don't you dare ruin this for her. You've always been the problem." I looked at all of them, the family I was supposed to belong to, and realized there wasn't a single person in that garage who would ever defend me. Dad's voice cut through again, low and cold this time. "You'll learn when to stay quiet." And then came the sound I'll never forget. The wrench slamming into the side of the workbench, inches from my hand. The vibration shot through the metal and into my bones. I didn't even scream. I just froze. He didn't hit me. He didn't have to. The message was clear. I wasn't worth restraint. Mom's laughter sliced through the silence. "At least now you're pretty when you're quiet," she said. "Finally useful for something." Mason smirked, satisfied. Lila stared at the floor, pretending it wasn't happening. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I wanted to scream, but my voice had already been stolen. Dad finally turned away, tossing the wrench onto the table. "Clean this up," he said, "and next time, remember who you're talking to." They all walked out, one by one, leaving me standing there in the flickering light, surrounded by broken tools and the echo of their laughter. The tears came later, quietly. Not from pain, from realization. They'd never cared whether I was right or wrong, only whether I was obedient. That night, I sat in my room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. There was grease on my cheek, dust on my clothes, and a silence inside me that felt like fire waiting to start. I'd spent years being their scapegoat, their emotional punching bag, their proof of superiority. But something changed that night. I looked at my own face, tired, bruised by disappointment, but still mine, and I whispered, "You're not their mistake. You're their consequence." It was the first time I ever believed myself, and it was the last night I let them define what silence meant, because next time they heard it, it wouldn't mean surrender. It would mean the storm was already on its way. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the wrench flash, heard the laughter, felt the heat in my chest that wouldn't die down. By morning, my pillow was cold, my mind burning. At breakfast, no one spoke to me. Lila sat at the table in her silk robe, humming, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Mason was there too, feet up on the chair, sipping coffee from Dad's favorite mug, like he lived here. Dad walked in wearing his mechanic uniform, whistling like a man proud of his control. "Morning," he said to everyone but me. Mom followed with that same frozen smile. When I reached for the plate, Dad snapped, "You eating my food now? Didn't you get enough attention last night?" Lila giggled. Mason smirked. "I'm just having breakfast," I said quietly. "Not in this house with that attitude," he barked, pointing to the door. "You don't pay for anything here, so keep your mouth shut and your head down." I stood there, holding the plate. I could feel my hands tremble, but my voice didn't crack. "Then maybe I shouldn't be here at all." For a second, the room went still. Mom's eyebrows lifted, and Dad laughed. Actually laughed. "You?" he said. "You? Can't even make it through a week without crying over something." "Where would you go?" Lila chimed in, her tone sweet and venomous. "Maybe she'll move into a library. Books don't talk back." Mom smirked. "Don't waste your energy. She'll be back in a day. Always is." I put the plate down, wiped my hands on the towel, and walked out without a word. Outside, the air felt heavier but cleaner. My legs carried me farther than I thought they would. I didn't have a plan, just distance, from the garage, from their laughter, from being pretty and quiet. I ended up at the bus stop near the hardware store where I used to help my uncle part-time before he moved away. The store owner, Mr. Harris, recognized me instantly. "Hey, kiddo," he said, eyes kind behind thick glasses. "You okay?" I nodded, but the lie barely held. "Just needed some air." He studied me for a moment, then handed me a cold bottle of water. "You still fix things better than anyone your age. You ever think about working here full-time?" The words hit me like sunlight through a storm cloud. "You mean, like an actual job?" He chuckled. "No, like a hobby that pays your bills." I smiled for the first time in days. "I'd love that." He let me start that same week. I worked hard, harder than anyone expected. I fixed shelves, repaired machines, even handled small welding projects. For once, my hands built instead of defending. At night, I rented a tiny room above the store. One window, one creaky bed, but it was mine. Silence finally felt safe. Weeks passed before Mom called. "Your father says you're embarrassing the family," she said coldly. "Working in a store like that, covered in dust. What will people think?" "Maybe they'll think I'm surviving," I said. She scoffed. "You're still his daughter, whether you like it or not." "No," I whispered. "I'm not." She hung up. I didn't call back. Lila texted a week later. "Dad says you owe him for the tools you broke." I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. But even as I tried to move on, the past followed like an oil stain, quiet, stubborn, impossible to wash out. Mr. Harris noticed one evening as I sat staring at a broken cash register. "You've got something heavy on your shoulders, huh?" I sighed. "They think I'm worthless." He smiled gently, "Then prove them right, about what they don't see coming." Something about that sentence stayed in my head for days, because he was right. They never saw me coming. 2 months later, I was promoted to store manager. I learned inventory systems, vendor contracts, and more about business than my parents ever imagined I could. Mr. Harris treated me like a partner, not an employee. He taught me everything: how to register ownership papers, how to manage accounts, how to buy shares quietly. And when he decided to retire, he looked at me and said, "You built this place up more than I ever did. I want you to have it." I froze. "Mr. Harris, I can't." "You can," he interrupted. "You've earned it." That night, I stood in that same garage. But this time, I wasn't there to cry. I was there to deliver a message. Dad, Mom, and Lila were sitting in the living room, laughing at something Mason said. The moment I walked in, the laughter stopped. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Mom sneered. "Come to borrow money?" I smiled faintly. Actually, I came to return something. Dad crossed his arms. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out a set of old mechanic tools, the same ones I'd used to fix his broken junk all my life. I placed them gently on the table. You always said I'd never make anything of myself. These tools say otherwise. He glanced down, confused. What are you playing at? I bought the store, I said simply. The one you told me was beneath you. Lila blinked. You what? I turned toward the door. You should visit sometime. I sell wrenches now, the kind you break when you can't control your temper. Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. Dad's face turned red, and for the first time in my life, he didn't have a comeback. As I left the house, I heard him mutter, "Ungrateful girl." But his voice cracked halfway through, and in that silence, I realized he finally understood what it felt like to lose control. Because I hadn't just walked away, I'd taken the one thing he valued most, his pride. 3 months passed before I saw them again. The store had become my world. Shelves neat, counters gleaming, a bell that rang every time a customer walked in. People started trusting me, asking for advice, bringing repairs others refused to fix. I'd built something from nothing, and it was steady, quiet, and mine. Then, one afternoon, I saw the familiar shape of my father's truck pull up outside. The sound of the engine still made my stomach twist, but not from fear anymore. Just memory. He stepped out slower than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, face lined with something that wasn't just age. My mom followed, clutching her purse like a shield. They both looked out of place, two people who once ruled my every moment, now standing unsure at the door of the life I built. When I opened the door, Dad's voice faltered. You've done. Well, I waited. He cleared his throat. The factory's cutting back. They froze part of my pension. The car needs repairs. Your sister can't help right now. There it was. The script he'd rehearsed all his life. Pride disguised as desperation. Mom looked around the store, her lips twitching like she wanted to sneer but couldn't find the strength. We thought maybe you'd lend us something. Just for a bit. For a moment, I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp. I gestured toward the shelves. You always said this was below. You. Funny. Now you're standing in the middle of it asking for help. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We didn't mean. You meant every word, I interrupted, voice calm. You meant it when you called me worthless. You meant it when you threw a wrench like I wasn't even human. You meant it when you let them laugh at me. Mom's voice cracked. We were angry. No, I said, cutting her off again. You were cruel. The silence stretched, heavy as steel. Customers glanced over but said nothing. I didn't lower my voice. I didn't need to. Dad finally muttered, We're still your parents. I looked him in the eye. And I was still your daughter when you humiliated me in front of strangers. That didn't stop you. For a long moment, no one moved. Then I walked to the counter and picked up the same model of wrench he'd once thrown. I placed it between us. Here, I said quietly. It's on the house. Maybe you'll remember what it feels like to build instead of destroy. He stared at it like it burned. Mom reached for his arm, but he didn't move. I turned away, ringing up another customer like they weren't even there. Good luck, I said softly. You'll need it. When they finally left, I stood there for a moment, watching through the window. Dad paused by the truck, staring at the wrench in his hand. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression. Not anger, not pride. Guilt. But I didn't need it. I didn't need his regret, his approval, or his apology, because he had already given me something far more valuable, the blueprint of everything I'd never become. That night, after closing, I turned off the lights and stood behind the counter, tracing my fingers over the smooth wood I'd sanded myself. I thought of all the things they'd tried to break in me, my voice, my confidence, my self-worth, and realized I'd built them back stronger, piece by piece, just like the shelves around me. They wanted me quiet. I became unshakable. They wanted me small. I became a foundation. They wanted me gone. I built a place they'd never own again, and when the silence filled the shop, it didn't sound like fear anymore. It sounded like freedom. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.